From Barangaroo Studios, the ausbiz COB is the key stuff you need to know about the day in business and finance.
Well, hello, and welcome to the COB. I'm Nadine Blaney. I have Josh Gilbert from eToro joining me now in just a tick. But it was quite the interesting day on market. When I got on air at 11 o'clock or shortly thereafter here in Sydney, we were just into negative territory. By the time the noon hour rolled around, we were well into positive territory, and we've continued to gain ground throughout the day today. I will point out that U.S. futures are flying right now, so we've had a bit of a pause in that so-called Trump trade, all the enthusiasm post the U.S. election, a little bit of concern about valuations if things were just getting a little bit ahead of themselves. But I can tell you that we've got E-minis for the S&P now up by 0.3% and NASDAQ E-minis up by 0.75% or 160 points. So things are looking pretty strong out there as we make our way toward the U.S. Open. So we will continue to keep our eye on the screens as the last of the day's trades roll through the S&P ASX 200. So quite the moves on this Monday. And part of the reason we're seeing this market, keep its head well above water is because of iron ore. Iron ore flirting with that 100 US level per wet metric ton on a little bit more enthusiasm about China. I had a conversation with Mai Bui from AMP today, and she said we are starting to see signs of life in terms of the Chinese economy. They reckon that GDP has bottomed out. And I was also chatting with the team at Firetrail Investments today at a little bit of a lunch. I think I'll name drop that. They did launch a small cap ETF on market today. And yeah, they are also of the view that there are lots of green shoots in China and believe that the worst of the economic pain is over there with some signs of life in the Chinese consumer as well. And then we've got NAB getting punished on market today. A bit of bad behavior. ASIC filing in the federal court alleging that it failed to respond to customers that were having financial hardship. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that story as it develops. But let's stay with the positive, and one of the most positive sectors on this Monday being utilities. So Origin Energy up by 1.7%, AGL 1.2%, APA Group 1.5%. So moving along to another sector that outperformed today, and that would be the consumer staples with Woolworths and Coles, both of which will be answering a few questions over the allegations brought against it by the ACCC in terms of discounting, but really didn't do anything to hurt those two companies today. And even Endeavour Group up by 1.4%, but TWE, again, on that China story, up by 3%. Now, mining also doing well. Look at Rio Tinto off the back of that iron ore price. And we've got Fortescue up by 1.5%, South 32, 6.5%, and Mineral Resources up by 6%. A world of hurt in terms of corporate governance there, but still, when you've got iron ore bouncing above that US 100 level, as it has done today, gives a little bit of a tailwind to those names. Energy as well, looking pretty good. Beach is up by 1.1%. And here's where the story changes, with NAB actually outperforming CBA right now. But look at that eye-watering figure for Commonwealth Bank. $153.41, shedding 0.8% today. NAB at $39.07, down 0.25%. As the corporate regulator files those civil penalty proceeding against the bank for failing to respond to hundreds of financial hardship applications within the legally mandated time frame, NAB, saying it is sorry. Agribusiness Elders is in a trading halt. It's set to buy out rival Delta Agribusiness in a deal valued at $475 million, also reporting stat profit halved to $45.1 million in FY25 from a year ago. I had a really good chat with Chris Stott, who is CIO at 1851 Capital, and he weighed in on Elders, and he's quite positive on the company. I had a great chat, actually, with Chris. It's really worthwhile going on ausbiz.com.au and seeking that out. We'll also put it in the newsletter, I think, today, because we talked Elders, we talked Fleet Partners, we talked small caps in general, and some of the portfolio holdings and where he sees them going from here. Also a little bit about the upcoming Australian election. Resolute Mining shares, the company agreeing to pay $247 million to Mali, the government of that African country, to hopefully keep operations on the go there. CEO Terence Halloran and 2 other employees are still being held in Mali. That's a week. Shares are down by 5.6%. And New Hope getting a big bump, up by 3.4% after reporting a 41% rise in quarterly earnings to over $300 million, driven by higher production and coal prices. I mentioned Fleet Partners. Again, Eric Stott weighing in on Fleet Partners, jumped the most in over 3 years on that earnings beat and a buyback. Life 360's, its shares slip as the CEO cut its stake. Chatted with Eric about that as well. He reckons this is for philanthropic endeavors. He doesn't see it as a red flag. And Clinuvel, it says that it will strategically prioritize 3 key clinical programs. And I thought it was worth mentioning about the retail space because Citi has downgraded Lovisa to sell, flagging risks. Shares off by close to 4%. Dusk, though, hit a 1.5-year high on strong sales for the first 20 weeks of the current fiscal year, up by 5.4%. And Accent Group, Citi has put a buy rating on the company with a price target of $2.57. It was up by $2 today, so trading at $2.51. And then here's a PS, uranium miners jumping after Russia bans exports to the United States, which of course is becoming an increasing user of uranium for its nuclear program. So Boss, Paladin, Deep Yellow, and Bannerman having a banner session today. Let's find out what Josh Gilbert from eToro kept his eye on today. He joins me now. Josh, front of mind for you as we head toward this U.S. session?
Yeah, good morning, Nadine. Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Not a great start, maybe the afternoon. Yeah, look, I think for me, like you said, that's sort of a bit of a start to the week for the US markets. Those futures looking pretty positive after what was, a pretty poor week in the end after such an amazing week. Obviously, when we first had that sort of Trump announcement come through, those Trump trades, as you said, losing a little bit of steam last week. That retail sales number coming in a little bit hot on Friday as well, potentially sort of maybe pushing back a little bit on those sort of rate cut expectations. We've seen December's cut being trimmed slightly as well. So, look, I think it's a little bit more of a positive start to the week in that sense. Obviously on the ASX today, picking up from some of those lows that we had at the start of the session, materials giving us a bit of a boost after a terrible week last week, energy coming through with, as you say, those aluminium names doing a bit of the heavy lifting as well. So yeah, a bit of a brighter start to the week. Again, sort of earnings season has been sort of good so far, and I think that's a big positive. Obviously got a massive name coming later in the week as well, and a few of those retail names coming through also. So a bit of a quieter week on the macro front, really. We don't really get a lot of data here. We get RBA minutes in the US. Again, nothing sort of really significant. We'll get initial jobless claims and things like that. We may also get a bit of volatility maybe coming from, depending on who we get in terms of Trump's picks. I know we saw him picking some of his cabinet measures last week. So that saw a little bit of volatility even today in terms of the healthcare side of things, where he picked sort of Robert Kennedy. So going to be interesting, I think, how that plays out over the next couple of weeks as well.
Yeah. So Josh, you alluded to this big company that we have reporting this week. You don't get much bigger than NVIDIA. What are your expectations? It's, again, like the question becomes, is it price for perfection?
Yeah, well, I think last time out, it was called the most important stock in the world by a few analysts, and it still sort of maybe remains that way, really. I think it does have such a big weighting on the market these days. It has the control over a lot of these stocks. It's almost a cancel your sort of Thursday plans type thing in the morning to sort of sit down and sort of see what unveils from their earnings. I think the biggest question here is, can they keep delivering and can they keep increasing that guidance? That's what the market is sort of focusing on. Last quarter, an unbelievably superb result, but maybe the market was slightly disappointed that we didn't get a bigger beat on guidance, after what is now almost sort of unattainable expectations, it feels like. But I think, look, from what I can see so far, if we look at what we've seen from the companies that spend with Nvidia, that is sort of some of the biggest companies in the world, Microsoft, Meta, Alphabet. These companies all increased their capex in the quarter. We saw that from their results, and all of that is going to the best in the business, and that is ultimately Nvidia. So again, the expectation here is going to be a beat, but also raising that guidance. I think they do it. Last quarter, we had a bit of negativity over that sort of Blackwell sort of manufacturing and sort of the production, but I think Jensen Huang sort of shut that down pretty well last quarter. He said that demand for those chips have been pretty insane, so that's going to be really important to look at. We should start to see the rollout and the deliverance of those chips early next year. So we'll probably get a bit more guidance around that. Also going to be looking at the buyback program as well. Announced a $50 billion buyback program last quarter. See how that's getting underway, just to sort of really see if it was smoke and mirrors really, or if they are actually going to sort of continue and sort of roll that out to see how much was purchased in the quarter. That will be really important. And finally as well, just on margins, margins actually have fallen off a little bit because of some of the waiting behind the Blackwell chips, but we don't see that as too much of a worry. It's falling from about 75% going to fall down to 73%, but we think as soon as those Blackwell chips begin to roll out early next year, that will pick back up again. But yeah, as you say, price for perfection, shares are up 196% year to date, so you have to deliver when your shares have risen that much in a year.
Oh my goodness, the weight of expectations. Can't wait for that. Josh, look, you mentioned we have minutes. Like, the economic data here locally is not anything to really write home about this week. One of the other sort of big stories today, at least, is those uranium miners flying. It comes so interestingly after Paladin had such a terrible week last week, cutting back some of its ambitious production targets. Do uranium stocks get any attention on the eToro platform, just to sort of, I guess, gauge if there's enthusiasm around them yet?
But I don't think we've probably seen the move just yet. And we saw a lot of interest around at the start of the year when we obviously had some big moves from those names. But I think any sort of news-driven cycle, we probably will start to see a pickup. This week, obviously, they've got a bit of a move at the end of last week as well. I think that came from sort of the China tax rebate. And then obviously today, as you mentioned, that sort of Russian news as well. I think when we do get that sort of news flow coming in on those particular stocks, we certainly will pick it up. But early signs is we've not seen anything sort of too sort of standing out. Sort of probably what we're seeing a lot of at the moment is sort of our retail investors sort of driving towards crypto assets, which is arguably not going to surprise anyone given the moves that we've sort of seen. Some of the legacy asset doing pretty well recently, but yeah, some of those sort of aluminium stocks I think will get a bit of attention at the start of this week if they do begin to sort of move. But yeah, crypto continues to sort of dominate the moves for investors at this week.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's just flesh that out a little bit for us. So, is it all Bitcoin, or is Ethereum rating as well?
Yeah, look, I think so. We're kind of moving in cycles a little bit with crypto assets at the moment. Bitcoin is that sort of main mover, and then what we do start to see, what we start to see happening is actually sort of narratives playing out. So in recent weeks, we've seen sort of this meme cycle. We obviously had Dogecoin do really well after Trump's presidency, and obviously with Elon Musk sort of being the Department of Efficiency and things like that. And then we've had sort of new meme coins coming through, the likes of Pepe and things like that. They've done very, very well. Then over the weekend, we started to see a bit of a move into what we would call sort of some of the legacy assets. And that for me is a bit of a sign that we are starting to see retail names coming back in. So when I say legacy assets, I'm talking some of the assets that have done very well in previous cycles, going back to sort of 2021 and 2017. So Litecoin, XRP, Ripple, Cardano, ADA, they did very, very well over the weekend. But in terms of Ethereum, as you say, that is an asset that is actually, very, very heavily underperformed against Bitcoin over the last couple of years. It's been branded as sort of this digital oil. It maybe has more use cases than what Bitcoin does. Smart contracts, blockchains, does have a lot of competition coming from Solana at the moment. But we do think that there is a lot of potential behind Ethereum, and that underperformance maybe gives us a bit of a sign that we might start to see a bit of an outperformance coming, especially if we do start to see retail coming back, as I say, have started to see over the last sort of couple of weeks, which is always going to happen when we see Bitcoin closing on that $100,000 mark. But yeah, look, I think really in terms of that performance of Bitcoin, that's the main driver. We see that as the king. We see that as the digital gold. And when we start to maybe see profit taking coming through, which is always going to be likely when we're nearing on that 100,000 mark, that cash will then flow into some of those other assets such as Ethereum and into those altcoins, which we have started to sort of see. But for the time being, we sort of see that Bitcoin is going to drive this market. But over time, that dominance of that asset will continue to sort of move into some of those other crypto assets, and into early next year was when we may start to see that altcoin bull market really come to town.
Well, Josh, look, it's a pleasure to speak with you today to start the week as per usual. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Nadine. Take care. See you then.
And Josh has really segued very nicely into my next little piece here. If you're listening or watching and you're wondering if you've missed out on all of what's happening with that cryptocurrency digital asset market, are you suffering from a bit of crypto FOMO? Well, we've got the solution for you. ausbiz.co/crypto FOMO. It's a investor event that we're holding on Wednesday, November the 20th. It's free to register. Of course, you can watch live or on demand. We're having a round table. And we'll also hear from Mark Carnegie. So from Mark Carnegie and Co. or MHC Digital, he's had laser eyes for Bitcoin for quite some time. One of the OGs, I'd say, in the institutional investor, professional investor realm, and he'll be joining us for a feature conversation as well. So really hope you can sign up for that, ausbiz.co/crypto FOMO. Back to stocks though. We know him, we love him, and the stock of the day was Elders. Mathan Somasundaram from Deep Data Analytics weighed in, along with Michael Gable from Fairmont Equities. Here's what they had to say.
Acquisition is actually quite interesting. I mean, this has been touted for a while. It's a big play. And I think that sets the scene. And you look at what they're raising at, and I think it's only a slight discount to the current price. So there's obviously demand there to take it up. I think the overall thematic is what's happening in the food thematic on a global scale. Supply, demand dynamics. Supply is being threatened, erratic weather, that's all playing out. And then you add what potentially is going to come out of the US as far as the trade war goes.
Yeah, look, I think we're heading into a good period for this sector. I think that weather's looking better for the rest of the year next year, and livestock prices as well. I think potentially it's fair value here. I mean, potentially if you get a bit of a dip after they come back online, maybe some negative days on the market, potential buying opportunity.
So there you go. Mathan Somasundaram has been a long time fan of Elders. It's a buy for him. It's a hold for Gable to buy on any further weakness. Okay, let's see what people were buying today out there. Weebit Nano, a very volatile stock, up by close to 10%. But it was those uranium plays, Boss Energy, Paladin, that did really well. Boss up by 8%, for example. South 32, I mentioned already, up by 6.5% to $3.77. And Alcoa, up by 6% to $68.17. Some of the laggards, Life 360 on that CEO share sale, down by 6.5%. Neuron Pharmaceuticals as well. It is on no news that I can see, down by 6%. Then you've got that downgrade for Lovisa, Core Lithium off by 3%, and Zip down by 2.5%. In some of the small to mid cap space, we've got Echo IQ down by 14%, and Highfield Resources off by 12%. Flipping up. That's what I was meaning to say. Off or down, AV Jennings 6.25% to 30 cents per share. So what's on tonight? We do get the NAHB Housing Market Index in the United States. Also hearing from FOMC's Goolsbee. So we'll be listening out for any sort of nuance around when interest rate cuts could be expected. Here tomorrow, we'll be focused on rates as well. At 11:30, we'll get the minutes of the last RBA board meeting. So we know that they're not thinking about cutting rates in 2024. Many in the market now expecting questioning, I should say, whether or not we'll get cuts even coming in 2025. Yeah, things change quite quickly out there. Now, where did markets end? The S&P ASX 200 up 8,300, 0.2%, so a little bit more muted than the gains you see on your screen from the COB Australia Index. But we've got, E-minis, futures in the United States flying, looking pretty good. Bitcoin coming under a little bit of pressure, but oil did lift in the Asian session. So we will be watching what happens in the US tonight to get our lead tomorrow. And of course, we'll bring it to you live from 9:45. Look, in the meantime, catch up with what you may have missed on ausbiz.com.au, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. I hope you have a good night.